Hey everyone and welcome. Today we're taking a little bit of a break from doing gardening stuff because I found this 80/20 ground beef on sale at a local supermarket for $3.99 a pound. And at the time of making this video, that was a good deal. I don't have a whole lot of room in my freezer and I want to get it shelf stable, so we're going to get it canned up. Now these little packs, they're 1 pound packs, and they have, well, I'll say most of them had the little pull tabs on the corner. I did find a few that didn't, so it made it pretty easy to get these all opened. And I can fit 4 of these into this large frying pan. And whenever you are canning a raw meat that is ground, it does have to be pre-cooked. So we're going to get this put all into the pan and get it burnt nice and browned up, but not crunchy, just lightly browned so it's cooked. And I like to score one direction with my flipper or spatula, whatever you like to call it. And then I will turn after I have them all scored this direction and then score it the other direction so that I actually make little cubes or squares. The reason why I like to do this is because the heat transfers more evenly throughout the meat. And then as it's cooking, it just makes it much easier to get it flipped and turned. So I'm just kind of doing a little time lapse here because it does take a little time to get this browned up, and a little sizzling noise for you. And as I am cooking this, I think I did about 4 batches. Now I'm going to get the water in the canner, and you have to start with cold water in a cold canner. So I'm going to get this filled to about 2 inches. And while I'm waiting for that to fill, I am using a fat-free beef broth. And I'm using fat-free because there's plenty of fat in the meat already. Don't need to add any more. So I need to get this up to almost a boil. And then I also am going to take and get my canner onto the unit and turn it to about medium-ish, medium, not high, because I just want to get the canner warmed up. I don't want to instantly shock it. And while that's warming up, I'm going to start loading my jars. And I just put my funnel in, scoop the meat, and you fill these to 1 inch of head space. Now, because ground beef is kind of a loose product, I do like to take my really fancy plastic chopstick and just kind of work the meat around to avoid having huge gaps in there. I don't pack it down by any means, but like I say, I just want to be sure I can fit as much in there as possible and not have a bunch of gaps. And then once I have the meat up to 1 inch of head space, then I'm going to ladle some of the hot beef broth in here. Again, matching the 1 inch of head space. And after I get it to that point, I'm going to take my chopstick again and I'm going to work it around the jar. I kind of go all around the sides and then wiggle it down the middle. And sometimes the meat floats up and I just kind of tamp it back down a little bit. But what this is doing is debubbling and getting rid of any trapped air in between the pieces of meat. And that usually does adjust the level of the fluid, so I have to add a little bit more to get it to that 1 inch of head space. Now I'm not going to bore you with filling all of the jars. I'm just going to do a couple here just to kind of show you. It's just a kind of a rinse and repeat, but it's a fill and repeat with all of the jars. And I am using wide mouth pint jars, and I can fit 7 jars per level on my canner. I'm just kind of showing you where the 1 inch of head space is here. I have it tilted so it kind of looks like it's not filled, but before I actually do put the lids on, I double check them again. I'm using white distilled vinegar because you need to wipe the rims of all of your jars once you have them filled in order to remove any grease and debris that could be stuck onto the rim. And it's really easy to get it on there and not even realize. So I usually do this twice. I'll wipe once and then I'll do a second just for good measure. And after I get all of the rims wiped and free of debris, I'm then going to be putting the lids on. Now they say nowadays you don't really have to heat up the lids anymore, but I just like to give them a little bit of a rinse just to get any of the factory, I don't know, anything from the factory off of there. And then I just put them in some pretty warm water. And I just like to do that because when I am pressure canning, especially hot liquid items, I like to have that rubber seal warmed up and soft. I just feel like it adheres to the rim of the jar much better. And once I get all of these on, and what I'm using is a jar lifter. It has a little magnetic tip on the end of it to lift those lids so you don't have to touch the hot water. But I'm going to take my rings and put them on finger tight And I'm kind of being dramatic with my fingers, but I'm just trying to show you I'm in no way reefing these down. I want them snug enough to where the lid isn't moving, but not so tight that the air can't be forced out of the jar, because when we put them in the pressure canner, that's what the canner is going to be doing in the beginning, is forcing all the remaining air in that jar out. And the only way it can do that is if the lid is not so tight. Now this is my jar lifter, because these jars are hot. You always start with hot jars before you put your hot product in. And I have my rack on the bottom of my canner. You never want to set your jars on the base of a canner. It can just get too hot and break your jars. And again, like I said, I am using little pints, wide mouth pints. I can fit 7 per level. And this is an All-American 921 canner. And in this one, I can fit 14 pints, or I can fit 7 quarts. So as soon as I get all 7 of my pints put in here, and it's kind of tricky with the camera in the way that's, I don't normally have to adjust them that much when I'm putting them in, but we'll get those all put in. And then I just wanted to show you how much grease, even though we drained it, was left. So I removed the remainder of that grease so that I could start filling the next level of jars. And again, I'm not going to bore you with the whole process. I'm just showing you here that all of that meat that I pre-cooked actually was in 2 different containers. There was so much of it. And I'm just going to do the same process, get all of these filled to 1 inch of headspace with my meat, with the liquid, debubble, wipe the rims, put on the lids, put on the rings, again, finger tight, and then get all of these lifted and into my canner. And if you like this kind of content, we are going to be doing more canning. We'd love to have you subscribe. We're going to do all kinds of things in the kitchen and all kinds of stuff outside. There's never-ending things going on here in our little farm. So again, I have a second rack on top of my first set of jars. I've loaded it with the second set. And the All-American canner does not have a rubber seal at the top, and it's metal on metal. So they suggest that you use olive oil and wipe it around the rim of the top of the lid. And once I do that, I also like to take and wipe olive oil on the inside rim of the canner itself where the lid meets it, just so I have a really good lubricant layer for where those 2 pieces of metal meet. And then I will put my lid on, and it twists into place and has like little finger locks that go under those bolts. And with this one, they just say to get the sides even, so I just do the finger method where opposite sides I'll stick my finger in there just to make sure that I have even spacing. Then I will lift up these twist bolts and I will tighten them down, but being dramatic again with my fingers just to show you that I'm not reefing them down at this point. I'm just kind of lightly tightening them just to keep the evenness of the spacing. Once I get those all done that way, I then go back and I give them a good snug twist to get the lid nice and tight. Then I will turn my canner up to get it to boil. And while we're waiting for it to boil, again, my second had just as much fat still remaining in it, so I'm going to get that drained off. And I didn't want to do a whole second canner load for about 3 jars. So what I'm going to do is put it back into this pan that we cooked all the ground beef up in, and I'm just going to make kind of a double or triple batch of taco meat. We eat tacos a lot here at our house, and I'm going to just kind of get it to where I can put it in some bags and put it in the freezer for some really quick, easy pull-out meals. Probably have it again this week, so might even put one in the fridge. And yes, we do have to buy filtered water from the store, so that was just a jug that I use for putting water in when I get it at the store. So here you can see I got 2 quart freezer bags full of taco meat. And I am just showing you this because it is kind of a messy process. Where we live, have a septic system, and fat and grease is not good for your septic. So I always like to take and just wipe with the paper towel any extra debris and grease out of whatever I'm doing before I actually wash and get that rinsed down the sink. Now I just wanted to show you here, this is a quart bag. There are a few paper towels in there, but not much. But all of this is the grease that we got out of that ground beef. Now I'm just going to put my mat up here to show you that the canner is venting. This is what it looks like. You want a steady stream of steam, and you want this to vent for 10 minutes. So the timer is up and it's time to put our weight on. We are at 10 pounds of pressure where we're located, so I'm just going to stick that on there. Going to stick it on there like that. And then as soon as it starts to do a jiggle, and I'll show you what that sounds like, then we are going to set the timer for the amount of time these need to process at. Okay, the timer has rung and the stove was turned off and the pressure came down to 0 naturally all by itself. I can remove the weight from the top. I usually wait about a minute. After that, I can then undo the lid. So I unscrew the bolts, and you will see I just lightly lift off the lid with it facing away from me, and I just give a little bit of a gap opening and let it sit for about 10 minutes. And the reason I do this is because the temperature difference between the inside of the canner and the outside is very extreme, and I don't want to shock my jars too much. So after about 10 minutes, I will take the lid off and I will let it sit like this for about another 10 minutes. And then I will come back and I will start lifting my jars out. And I have found for most products, this amount of time allows the jars to acclimate enough to where I don't have any kind of siphoning, which is where the liquid is so hot and still bubbling that it will force its way through the lid, and that again can ruin your seal. So I'm just going to take all of these jars out. I set them on a cooling rack with a towel on top, again, so that the coolness of the counter doesn't affect the heat of the jars. This is what they look like fresh out of the canner. You can see the liquid still bubbling a little bit. This is what it looks like 24 hours after. You can see any fat that was left in there has solidified at the top. I have them washed and labeled and ready to be stored. So thanks for hanging out with me today. I'll see you next time.